country. So there we go.
Dorian Fenton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, it seems like it's left to me to inject some sense back into the debate around Clause 7, and I have an amendment on this clause, and I'm really, really happy to talk about the things that the member keeps insisting on, which is about democracy. Now, democracy. On the one hand, he wants to impose National Party democracy on a bunch of workers who choose to withdraw their labour. That's right, they choose to withdraw their labour. But he doesn't want to balance up the scorecard. So the situation under this bill is workers will be required to have a secret ballot by the members' bill. They will be that provision will be able to be enforced by employers in a court of law, which is interference in democracy and democratic processes, actually. But on the other hand, it is not balanced. It's biased against one party in the collective employment agreement relationship. And so my Clause 7, Amendment to Clause 7, is to add a new section which would require shareholders to hold a secret ballot before they imposed a lockout. Now, what is a lockout? It is the opposite to a strike. It's where an employer can say to their workers, their employees, like they have in this situation of Tallies, 1,000 of their meat workers, we're not going to allow you to come to work, we're not going to pay you to come to work until you are starved into submission, until you agree to our demands. So it's the opposite. So, it's a balancing part of the Act. There is the right to strike and there's the right to lockout. What this member wants to do is give privilege to one side, in other words, the employers. So he's saying on the one hand, workers must have a secret ballot, and as my colleague and others have already said, most of them do, and they do it through their processes as democratic unions. It's up to them to decide how to do it. However, if the member insists on doing this, he should even up the balance. Now, his minister, the Minister of Labour, likes to talk about balance in the employment relationship, having balance between employers and employees. My amendment would provide that. That would provide that if Mr. Talley, the Talley family, decided they were going to lock out their 1,000 workers, they would have to have a secret ballot of their shareholders before that lockout could take place. Now, what's wrong with that? And I asked the member and the chair, what's wrong with that? What's wrong with having a balance? If he keeps insisting it's about democracy, why is democracy on one side but not on the other? Why isn't he considering this very, very reasonable amendment that I'm proposing? The other thing I wanted to say about the port workers' situation, actually what we've seen tonight is, they're back in negotiations, but do you know why? Because the court has said the Employment Relations Act, which Labor brought in, which this government has continued to interfere with, which is based on good faith bargaining and fair dealing, and mutual relationships of trust, and mediation is the first port of call. The court has decided that the port company has not met those provisions. So thank goodness for the Labor Party and the Employment Relations Act, and made the Minister of Labour in this government not get their grubby hands further on the Employment Relations Act, as they're planning to do. They're planning to weaken collective bargaining even further. They're planning to make it harder for workers. This provision by this member will make it harder for members to carry out a strike. I don't see what the problem is in balancing up the equation. As I said, we'd rather not have this at all, but if the member insists that there must be a secret ballot and a law has to be there to require it, and it can be enforced in a court of law, shareholders should have the same rights, the same democratic rights to tell their company and to vote on whether their company should lock out workers like the Tully's workers up and down the country, in the small country, all the small towns throughout New Zealand, in the Māoriwas, in the Wairoas, in the towns where the whole town is dependent on the meat workers. Those workers are standing outside. They don't have a choice about a secret ballot. They've been locked out. They're being starved into submission. Their employer is completely disregarding the provision of the Employment Relations Act. It is really unfair, and I appeal to the member and the chair to show that he's really serious about democracy and fairness, as he keeps insisting he is by supporting this amendment.
Jamie Lee Ross.
Mr Chair, Andrew Little tells us that workers are free